Happy Monday, everybody. Good morning to you. It's 10 o'clock. It's time for 10 with Tim. It is the start of a new week, and it is going to be a big week for us. Ordinarily, we do a chapter at a time, but this is going to be a 10-chapter week. You with me? 10. I know you can do it. I know you don't think you can do it. Some of you don't think you can do it. You can do this. We're going to pick up the pace on a couple of days this week. I'm not just trying to rush to the end of Ezekiel. I'm not at all, but these chapters that we'll put together belong together. And honestly, their themes are often common. They share a lot in common. And so it's just the smartest way for us to work our way through this section of Ezekiel. So today we're doing chapter 24, which is sort of a turning point in the ministry and book of Ezekiel. So let's start right there. Chapter 24, verses 1 to 27. Thanks for being with me. It starts off with another timestamp, but this is a very important timestamp. The date is January 15th, 588 BC. Ezekiel is told to make a note of that, to write down that date. You remember that date. This is the date of the beginning, literally in history. This is the date of the beginning of the siege of Jerusalem. So what Ezekiel has been prophesying and predicting all this time is now beginning. It's happening. This is breaking news. And I remind you, in Ezekiel's day, hundreds of miles from Jerusalem, there was no news from home unless a messenger would come, and messengers haven't been coming. The only news from home is what God reveals to Ezekiel, and this is breaking news. They know it before a messenger comes, and a messenger will come. So it's really interesting. Once more, Ezekiel is to enact his prophecy. It's enactment prophecy. He's going to act out his sermon. And in this case, he takes a large pot and puts meat in it. Now, as we said back when we were talking about, was it chapter 11, verse 3, when it seems like the Israelites have this saying in Ezekiel's day, and it is the saying something like, this is the pot and we're the meat, something like that. In other words, for the people who were still in Jerusalem, they thought that Jerusalem itself, the city, was like an iron pot, which means they were safe. And they considered the fact that since they were left, that the ones who went into exile, they must have been the scraps, they must have been the rejects. And so the fact that we're still here at home in Jerusalem means we're safe. And so Ezekiel, this will be the second time now, he takes that, that assumption, that saying, turns it on its head. You're not the safe ones at all. You're not the choice piece of meat here, in other words. And so he acts out his prophecy, kind of the way some of us cook supper. He just burns it to nothing. He puts all this amazing meat and choice cuts of meat in the pot, but then he just lets it cook. And he lets it cook down till all of it's just slime. Just cook it down to nothing, and then just let the slime cook away, to just, burnt to a crisp on the inside of the pot, right? And then at that point, you take the pot, put it right in the fire, and let the iron pot just, burn red. In other words, it's like a self-cleaning oven, right? We're going to clean the pot by just burning down to ash everything inside the pot. Burn it down, to nothing. And then, shake out the ash and the pot is clean, right? But then the Lord says, unfortunately, the corruption of Israel can't be cleaned out. So it's again another enactment prophecy. It's amazing, but the point, of course, is it's happening. That time has come. You may be the meat, and Jerusalem may be the pot, but God is the fire, and the judgment has begun. So again, it's breaking news, right? Write down the day. He says January 15th, 588 BC, because that's the day that everything that Ezekiel had prophesied actually began to come to pass. The Babylonians have absolutely put the city of Jerusalem under siege. It's the beginning of the end for the city. Strangely, though, that date becomes important in a personal way. And for Ezekiel, he's been a prophet, he's been a weird dude, but we haven't known anything personal about him. Early on, that first chapter, the second chapter, when he's called before God, I felt like I related to him personally, but still, you don't know a thing about him, except here at the end of chapter 24, it turns out Ezekiel's married. Like, he had a wife this whole time. This poor woman is married married to Ezekiel. Can you even imagine? I mean, just, some of you, like y'all, we just been with them like, a few weeks, and y'all are already done with them, and can you imagine being married to this man, all the crazy stuff he's done out in her front yard, can you imagine what it's like for her to go to IGA and they're saying, what's up with your husband? And she's just, she loves him. And we find out in these verses that Ezekiel loves her. He loves her. We didn't know, this tender side of him, but she's called, there in verse 15, New Living Translation says she's your dearest treasure. But I think the Hebrew is something like, she's the delight of your eyes. In other words, she's like the only thing in the world that he can look at that brightens him. He loves her, and he finds out that she's about to die. No, we don't know if she's been sick, if this is the end of an extended illness, or if it's just sudden. But all we find out is, your wife is about to die, and Ezekiel gets the knowledge up front. And then with that, the Lord commands him to sort of integrate this personal tragedy in your preaching. Like for me, if I lose my wife, y'all just expect me, I'm going to take a few weeks off, because, I'm going to mourn her, but Ezekiel isn't going to be allowed to mourn, not publicly anyway. So what the Lord says is you're going to integrate this heartbreak into your sermon. And so don't show any public signs of mourning. All the normal stuff that you would do. You're not gonna uncover your head. You're not going to take your shoes off. You're not going to dress in sackcloth ashes. When the neighbors come by bringing casseroles, you're going to refuse. You're not going to eat the casseroles. You're not going to do any of the things that anybody would expect you to do. And then when the people say, Ezekiel, what's wrong with you? You lost your wife. Why are you not mourning? Then you just preach this sermon to them. And you tell them, that you have lost, Jerusalem, the delight of your eyes, Jerusalem, the temple, the very deepest, sweetest part of your heart is gone now, and you must not mourn. You be like Ezekiel, Jerusalem is gone, but you're not going to mourn. Don't you shed a tear, What's that about? What is that? Honestly, I'm not sure. I don't even know what that represents. And in your comments today, let's talk about it. What do you think it even means? I guess there may be three options. I'll offer them. You can vote on yours, or you can offer another one, because honestly, nobody really knows what this means. On the one hand, it may just be, kind of a cynical command. In other words, it's God's way of saying, again, God is not minimizing Ezekiel's personal grief. God knows that Ezekiel loved his wife. And that's why his lack of mourning is going to be striking to the people. But God also knows the hearts of the people. And so in this case, it could be a cynical command. In other words, don't even act like you care. Jerusalem is gone. Israel has been erased, by my wrath. Don't act like you care now. Don't mourn as if somehow you're broken about this because the callousness of your sin, So possibly it's, like I said, a cynical command. It's God's way of saying, yes, it's happened now, but don't act like you care now. Don't come crying to me now, So maybe it's a cynical command. Maybe it's something like, there is no display of grief that is adequate. The loss here is so enormous that you forego the normal process of grieving, because this isn't a normal loss. This isn't like anything else ever. And so there's no public display that's going to be able to express this kind of loss, this kind of devastation. I don't know. That's the second option. Or some scholars say that that the only time when mourning was forbidden in the Old Testament context was in case of capital punishment. And you know how we've talked about how several times in Ezekiel's preaching that the coming punishment was sort of, described, like we talked about last week, in the case of adultery, where capital punishment was considered acceptable. That's just, that's what happens to the unfaithful partner, And so in this case, if this is to be seen as just, if this is to be seen as exactly what the covenant called forth, if this is capital punishment, well, then you don't mourn that. I don't know. What do you think it means? Among other things, this means a very important transition in Ezekiel's own ministry. Notice the last verses here. There's going to be a messenger. Someone's going to come to Jerusalem. It's going to tell you what's happened. You're already going to know what's happened. But notice the word here to Ezekiel personally. When he arrives, your voice will suddenly return. Why? He done nothing but talk, for 24 chapters. All he's done is talk, But remember back in, was it chapter 3? Where God said, I'm going to cause your tongue to stick to the roof of your mouth, and the only words you'll speak will be my words. So I get the idea, and again, I'm reading back now, and I'm getting the idea based on what chapter 3 said, that Ezekiel he's not been walking around talking like a normal person. Like the only words he's been speaking for something like 6 years of public ministry. If you check the timestamps, I think it's 6 years. So for 6 years, he hasn't been walking around, when he wasn't preaching, saying, hey, how y'all doing? Looks like it might rain. I don't think he's been speaking like a normal person. I think that he has been silent, the tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth until God says, speak, And so now marks a turning point. Notice what it says, verse 27, when he arrives, your voice will suddenly return so you can talk to him normally. And people are going to notice that, like this is going to be a symbol, like all of this sudden Ezekiel, is talking like a normal person, and that's going to be a sign too. That in itself is going to be a sign that that the Lord is the Lord. They're going to recognize God's power in that. And honestly, Ezekiel's ministry from this point on is going to change. He's been prophesying doom and gloom for Jerusalem, and now that has come. And so now you're going to see him turn and bring a message to the nations, and then there's going to be more of a message of hope for Ezekiel. His ministry literally changes from this point on. So for tomorrow, 3 chapters for tomorrow. I know you can do this. 3 chapters for Tuesday, chapter 25, 26, and 27. Okay, 3 chapters. You can do this. Eat breakfast and then jump into it. Chapters 25, 26, and 27 for tomorrow. And I'll see you in the morning, 10 o'clock, Lord willing, 10 with Tim. I love you guys. It's going to be a big week for us, but we're going to get through this together. And again, God's going to speak to us. This is his word. It's food for our souls, right? So you're going to have a big meal for tomorrow. Chapter 25, 26, 27. I'll see you then.